Afternoon, boys and girls. Time for the next instalment from Frost Hollow Hall. And we're up to chapter 11, which is entitled Gone. I'd no intention of waiting for that rat Will Potter. It was almost dark by now, and though the snow had stopped falling, the sky was clear, making the cold seem sharper than before. I went up the drive with a heavy heart, sure I'd blown my chances of a job at the hall. Who in their right minds would hire a sneak like me? I was absolutely useless. Nearing home, I saw a huddle of people on our front step. The door was open, casting a pale light over them. They were too many all at once to be ordinary visitors paying a call. One by one, they turned to watch me coming up the lane, their faces so grim that a sense of dread came over me and I began to feel sick and ill. Something was very wrong. I walked slowly towards them, fearing what they might tell me. One of them was our neighbour, Ruby, jiggling her squawking baby on her hip and talking quickly in a low voice. She hadn't yet seen me. I stopped at our gate. "Ruby, what is it?" "Tilly, you're here," she cried and rushed towards me, seizing my arm. "Thank goodness!" "What is it? What's happened?" People stepped aside to let me through, and I felt a hand on my back pushing me into the house. Ruby closed the door behind us. "Be gentle with your ma. She's had an awful shock," Ruby said. My stomach lurched. Someone's died. Pa! Is it Pa? I reached out to steady myself. He's dead. That's why he hadn't come home. I stumbled into the room like a blind thing. "Ma?" My voice shook. A little grey shape sat huddled on the chair. "Ma?" She turned her head just a bit, like she wasn't sure who was speaking. Her face was whiter than the wall behind her. "What's going on?" I rushed to her side. "Ma, please, speak to me." She looked right through me, then turned away. "We thought you'd both gone after him," said Ruby. "You and Eliza." Every part of me turned cold. "What do you mean?" "Your father. He was seen boarding the Bristol coach this afternoon. Eliza was with him. Word was you were there too." The room swam in front of me. I pushed past her for the door and threw up all over the front steps. I sat in a daze until Ruby finally got up to leave. Her baby was crying again and she had 5 more still to feed at home. "I'll have to go now, Tilly," said Ruby kindly. "You've not a scrap to eat here, poor things. I'll send something by if I can." "Ta, but we'll manage," I said. In truth, I didn't see how. But I didn't cry. I felt drained and empty, like I'd run out of ways to feel. Once Ruby had left us, the room seemed too quiet. Ma hadn't moved in her seat, and I wondered if I'd ever get up again either, since I hardly trusted my legs to hold me. Yet I couldn't bear the silence between us. "Shall I get the tea on?" I said. Ma stared at me blank-eyed. "Tea? I reckon we might need it." She sighed deeply. Her nose was red and her mouth drooped down at the corners. So this was it then, just the 2 of us. It did little to comfort me. In fact, it felt awkward, like being with someone I hardly knew. Any moment she'd tell me she'd been right all along, that Pa was no good and I was a fool to have thought otherwise. But she didn't speak another word. The room had grown so cold my breath came out like smoke, and the frost had set hard on the windows. I put a blanket over Ma's knees and got to work, managing to coax the stove alight and putting a pan of water on to heat. There really wasn't anything left to eat, but at least we'd have hot tea. I wetted the dregs from the morning's pot and busied myself getting the cups out. It felt better to be doing something. Outside it was proper dark. As I went to close the curtains, I saw the stars were out, and before I could help it, I was thinking of Pa and Eliza. They were out there somewhere, under this very same sky, and I wondered if Pa was looking at the stars like I was, and thinking the same about me. I shut my eyes to make a wish. Keep him safe. Bring him back home. And Eliza too. Like a blow to the chest, it hit me. He'd gone, hadn't he? He really had gone. He wasn't coming back, and he'd live out his dream with Eliza, not me. shut the curtain quick, unable to bear it. I swore I'd never wish on a star again. Once the water had heated, I made tea, stirring the scrapings of an old twist of sugar into Ma's drink. Here, I said, placing her hands round the cup. Don't spill it. As she sipped, she shut her eyes. That better? She nodded slowly and opened her eyes, looking at me in a way I wasn't used to. Then she pulled something from her pocket. It was a piece of paper folded up very small. Eliza left this on the table, she said, handing it to me. I found it when I came back from the village, and then Ruby came by with the news that she'd been spotted. What does it say? I ain't looked. Read it to me, will you? And don't leave nothing out. Ma wasn't so good at reading. Right then I wished I wasn't either, bracing myself as I unfolded it. It was the White Star Flyer, the very same one Eliza had shown me just this morning. Written on the back of it was a note. The writing was most definitely my sister's. Dear Ma, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't try to find me because I shan't come back. See, I've found out where Pa is and what he's up to, and I'm going after him, but not to bring him home. He's at the Buckland Inn and he's leaving today to catch a boat from Liverpool to America. My heart caught in my throat. Buckland was the next village, just a few miles over the hill. It was 10 times worse knowing this. He'd been so close and still hadn't come home. What the heck had stopped him? Ma looked paler than ever. Shall I keep going? She shut her eyes and nodded. And I'm going after him. He doesn't know I'm coming. It'll be a terrific surprise. I used to think Pa's big talk was just stuff and nonsense. Then I found this advert. That's when I knew he meant it, that dreams can come true. All I do is read stories where adventures happen to other people. I'm sick and tired of it. You see, I fancy a bit of fun myself. It was agony to hear. This wasn't how things were in our family. It was me who sided with Pa. Me! Whenever he talked about the house or the land or the pigs we'd have one day, Eliza had seemed bored to tears. Now I could hardly bear to look at Ma, who'd fallen back into a shocked sort of daze. I read the final lines. So please don't be too sad. I shall tell Tilly myself that I'm leaving, and if she wants to tag along, I don't suppose I can stop her. Goodbye, Ma. Your Eliza. My heart jolted. We'd had cross words this morning. Of course Eliza hadn't come to find me. Or had she? We'd been sent home from school early, and all afternoon I'd been up at Frost Hollow Hall. I was suddenly deeply glad, for who knows what I might have said to her. I wasn't even sure myself. Well, I didn't see her, I said. A hopeful thought came to me then. Pa might not want her with him. He'd have to pay her passage, wouldn't he? And she'd never showed much interest in his plans before. Ma shook her head sadly. Someone saw them, remember? The coach left at 2 o'clock this afternoon. They looked happy enough, so I was told. Anger welled up in me. This wasn't a pleasant picture at all. I've lost her, haven't I, Ma said. I'd never seen her cry before. Now she did it quietly, the tears streaming down her cheeks and onto her frock. I felt truly terrible. Here I was, her very own daughter, and I didn't know how to comfort her. After a bit, she wiped her face. I blame your father for all of this, she said bitterly. Good riddance to him. But why did he have to take my Eliza? He didn't exactly take her. She chose to go. She didn't seem to hear me. He'd always fill your heads with stupid notions. I told him not to, but he'd never listen. And now this has happened. I hope he's mighty pleased with himself. I bit my lip. I loved it that Pa hoped for better things. They weren't stupid notions to me. But it was no good explaining this to Ma. Her dander was well and truly up. And do you know the worst thing, she said? Oh, heck, there was more. Yesterday I got paid. I was putting a bit by for the rent. She reached for the little brass money pot on the mantel and took the lid off to show me how empty it was. Look, cleaned out, all gone. See what he's done to us, that father of yours? Pa didn't take it, how could he? Oh, grow up, Tilly. I realise Eliza took it, but only to go after your pa, just to get her to Buckland or Bristol or wherever she was hoping to find him, which really makes it his fault. Even now, she couldn't blame Eliza. Well, she didn't have to take it, I said crossly. Ma shook her head. She was trembling with anger. Your pa is a waste of blinking space, and it's about time you realised it. She might as well have twisted the knife already in my chest. And it's about time you realised the sun don't shine out of Eliza's backside, I said before I could stop myself. All went quiet. I hadn't meant to be so bold. Now I flinched, ready for the blow that was sure to follow. But she didn't hit me. She just rubbed her eyes and got to her feet like it was all a huge effort. I'm going to bed. I couldn't bear that she was leaving me. Bad company was better than none. Please, stay a bit. I'm sorry I spoke out of turn, I said. She'd already reached the stairs. I've had enough for one day. So I gave her what was left of the candle and hoped she'd have forgotten my outburst by morning. You have it, she said, handing it back to me. You're a good girl, Tilly. I knew you wouldn't just up and leave. My eyes prickled with tears. She touched my shoulder lightly, just once, and moved on up the stairs. Soon after, I went to my own bed, tired to my very bones. I wasn't even planning to get undressed. I just wanted to fall down and sleep. But glancing about me, my heart sank. I cursed the candlelight, since it made me see how bare the room was now Eliza wasn't here. I could hardly look at the empty chair, which just this morning had been heaped with her clothes. Now the bed looked too big, the covers too neat. Our room had never been this tidy before. I put the candle down and lifted the blankets. How odd. The mattress was bare. Where the heck was the bedsheet? I hoped to God she hadn't nicked that and all, since we didn't have another one. My foot caught on something soft. The sheet was half hidden under the bed, like someone had stuffed it there in a hurry. In amongst it was a dark shape. I grabbed the candle and thrust it before me. The shape was a stocking, the very one I'd hidden Kit's ring in. My heart began to race. Oh no, please, no. I bent to pick it up. It felt horribly light and empty in my hand. As I sank to my knees and started to sob, I already knew what Eliza had done. Anyone bold enough to take the rent money from her mother's pot was never going to leave a gold ring behind. I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. I didn't care that Ma might hear me. I screwed the stocking up in a tight ball and hurled it at the wall. No father, no sister, no ring. What did anything matter now? I crawled into bed and willed sleep to come. Dreaming 3. My fingers are white like bones picked clean by fishes. I can't feel them at all. Above my head, the ice holds fast. Every step, every breath is exhausting. My chest is tight. I can't breathe deep enough. I'm tired of this place. It's too cold, too dark. If only I could just lie down. The dark gets darker. My eyes begin to close. Out of nowhere, a pale shape comes forward. It's him, the boy, Kit Barrington. Goodness, the look of him. All I can do is stare. His beauty works on me like magic. But his eyes are pleading, desperate. I should be doing something, I know I should, but my head is all dizzy and I can't think straight. I see his mouth form the words, help me. As he moves closer, panic flares up in my chest. Why me? Can't he see that I'm useless? My tiredness is overwhelming. My arms and legs go heavy. I want to sleep, to give up on this and never open my eyes again. He's crying now. I shake my head. He's got me all wrong. I'm no help to anyone. He grips my hands tight, the chill of his fingers biting into mine. He's holding on to me for dear life. He needs me. I'm his only hope. Even his tears are beautiful. Chapter 12. Going into service. When I opened my eyes, it hit me all over again. I swore I'd been punched in the heart. I pulled the covers over my head and curled up tight in a ball. It didn't make the hurting go away. The early morning sun shone in through the windows, just like this was any other Wednesday. except it wasn't. Slowly it dawned on me there was little to be done about Pa and Eliza, but there was plenty I could do for Kit, especially as a maid in his family's house. Lying here feeling sorry for myself wasn't helping no one. Ma got up soon after I did. She looked a mess. Her frock was stained and her hair unpinned, and she moved about the place like a sleepwalker. I'd expected more ranting, more fury. Not this. It made her seem sadder than ever. I'd just got the stove lit when a sharp knock at the door made us both jump out of our skins. Ma's look turned suddenly wild. "Don't answer it," she hissed. "You'll be wanting the rent again." "I know you're in there, Clara Higgins," said a voice from the doorstep, "and I'm warning you, if you don't open this door, I'll break it down myself." "We can't put him off forever, Ma." Wiping my hands on my skirts, I opened the door. The landlord stepped back, surprised. "Oh, aye, doing your mummy's dirty work then, are you?" he said. Up close, he looked like a prize rodent. He had small eyes set in a very red face, and when he spoke, his front teeth seemed too large for his mouth. "My, you've grown into a pretty young thing, haven't you?" His gaze ran over me in a way I didn't much like. Shame I can't say the same, I thought, and folded my arms. "Exactly how much do we owe you?" "More than you can afford by the looks of it," he said, leering. "I'm warning you, I've got another family I could move in here tomorrow." "We need a bit more time." He came closer. "You've had time, Missy." Though my heart was racing, I stood my ground. "You'll get your money, I promise." "I want it now." "Well, we ain't got it now." He moved closer still. I smelled the gin on his breath. "You ain't too growed up for a clip round the ear." Ma pushed past me in the doorway. "Take this, you vulture," she cried. Something gold spun through the air. It hit the landlord square in the chest. For one confusing second, I was sure it was Kit's ring, and a sob broke from my mouth as I went to grab it. The landlord got there first, scrabbling through the snow like a terrier at a foxhole. He held up Ma's own wedding ring between his thumb and forefinger. I looked at her in total dismay. So this was what it had come to. We'd finally sunk this low. But she wouldn't meet my eye. She was breathing hard and glaring at the landlord. "Cheap gold," he said, getting to his feet. "It'll buy you a couple of weeks, then you're out." Without another word, Ma pulled me back inside and slammed the door. She collapsed into her seat, exhausted. "What are we going to do, Tilly? We can't find him that money in 2 weeks." I was still in a state of shock. "You gave him your wedding ring." I had no choice. "But your wedding ring." "Leave it be," she said. My eyes stung. I felt my throat go thick. A gold ring stood for love, didn't it? Pure, proper love. Here was Ma throwing hers out the door like it counted for nothing. Maybe it didn't any more for her or Pa. And as a thought, that hurt quite enough. Then there was Kit's ring. I'd left it in a stocking for flip's sake, where anyone with half a brain might find it. And someone had. If I clapped eyes on my sister now, I'd rip her beating heart out. Though in truth, I doubted she even had one. She was no better than that foul-faced landlord. In fact, she was worse, thieving from her own flesh and blood. I blamed her, fair and square. Yet I felt sore too, since some of the blame lay with me. Kit had given me a precious thing and I'd not taken proper care of it. If a gold ring stood for love, then what the heck did that say about me? "Go to the mill and ask about Eliza's old job," said Ma. "They might give it you if you're quick." I stared at her. "The mill? We need money, Tilly, and it's time you got a serious job, a girl of your age." "But there's a housemaid's job going. It's what I want to do. Really it is," I said, all in a rush. "Though it'll mean living in." She looked at me blankly. "And it'll pay more than I get at the school." "Are you set on it?" "I am." "So where's this job to?" "Frost Hollow Hall." She did a heavy sigh. "I thought you'd seen enough of that place." "But that's just it," I wanted to say. "I haven't seen enough of it by far." "It's a good position," I said. "I'd be lucky to get it." Ma's face darkened. "It's a fine household, yes, but there's been ill luck and broken hearts aplenty in that family. No one stays working there for long." "You said that was just idle gossip." "Some of it, maybe," she said. "But if you want to go into service, you'd do better trying somewhere else." I shook my head. I didn't fancy clearing up after just anyone. My heart was set on this job. It was my chance to be a fly on the wall, a part of the furniture. And all the talk of queer happenings made me want to work there even more. Only I couldn't explain this to Ma. Yet she must have seen that my mind was set, because she got to her feet and put a pan of water on the stove. So when are you going to ask about this job? Soon as you can spare me, I suppose, I said, thinking how pale she looked. She nodded. Right, we'll have you ready in an hour. Can't send you to Frost Hollow Hall looking like a ragamuffin, can we? With that, Ma seemed to spring into life. While I shined my boots and found a clean shift, she busied herself brushing out my best Sunday frock and sponging down the bits where mud still clung to the skirts. She'd spread it across the table, which got me picturing the kitchens again up at Frost Hollow Hall, and me laid out, half dead from drowning. A shiver ran right down my back. Poor Kit. No one had pulled him free. His spirit was still in that dreadful lake even now. Then Ma said, How did this hem come loose? She was frowning at the place in my skirt where Kit had hidden his ring. My heart gave a painful thud. Must have caught it somehow. She said, biting the black thread with her teeth. They wear uniform up at the hall, I expect. Tear that and you'll be mending it yourself. Promise I'll be careful. I would too, and not just because of the sewing. I'd be wearing something neat for once, something that might actually fit. Ma went upstairs and came back with her best red flannel petticoat. For you, she said, to make you feel smart, even if your frock has seen better days. I jumped to my feet. Blimey, really? For me? Not till you've had a proper wash. The pan of water was warm by now, so I poured it into our tin bath and stripped off, teeth chattering. The water was grey when I'd finished. Then I wrapped myself in an old sheet and sat by the hearth to dry out my hair. As I watched the flames, I began to feel very sorry that I had to leave Ma at all. We only had each other now. By this time tomorrow, who knew where I'd be and what I'd be up to? So much was changing, so very fast. My head ached with it all. Buck up then, said Ma, bringing me back to myself. And she might have meant herself too, for she turned all thoughtful again. I dressed quickly, glad to be in clean clothes for once. Last touch, Ma said. She twisted my hair into a knot on the top of my head and pinned it in place. You look... Her lip began to tremble. Very respectable indeed. She steered me towards the gloomy old mirror above the mantel. When I saw my reflection, I gasped. I'd never worn my hair like this before, all swept off my shoulders and held up with pins. My eyes were huge, dark things. My neck seemed so slender and pale. I barely recognised myself. I turned this way and that, unable to stop smiling. What would Kit think of me now? You're blushing at yourself, Ma said, smiling a little too. But goodness me, how fine you look. Why, you're pretty as a rose. And she sounded surprised, like she'd never really noticed before. That's the end of today's reading. Tomorrow we'll carry on with chapter 13. Have a great evening. Bye, guys.